next session will feature my friend Sir John McEwen, and we're going to talk to Sir John in three parts. The first part, I'll talk about his family, and specifically his uncle, Rory McEwen. I will also talk about Sir John coming over to Chicago as to be chieftain of the Clan McEwen, and we'll talk a bit. Maggie McEwen will talk to Sir John about the journey to his chiefship. So we'll talk about Clan McEwen in a wee bit, but first let me tell you a little about John. Husband of science teacher Rachel, father of Susanna, Georgia, Joseph and Robin, son of Bridget and Robin. John was educated at Ampleforth, University College in London and the University of Glasgow. He worked extensively as a journalist, obituaries mainly, but in 2013 rediscovered a passion for theatre. Since then, he's acted in numerous plays, directed several more, and written and produced and acted in 4 full-length shows. He's chairman of his local theatrical troupe, the Duns Players, and in 2019 founded Duns Playfest, an annual festival of new drama which is thriving. His one-man show, Country, Scotland, What Like Is It, which I'll talk to John about in just a moment, has toured widely. John and his family live in the ancient village of Polworth near Duns in the Borders. And full disclosure, I am also from Duns. My family has known John's family for many years. Sir John and my father, the magnificent Bob Noble MBE, were very close. Indeed, Sir John wrote my father's obituary, something for which I'll always remain grateful. John and Dad were both part of Duns Players, and I must thank Sir John and everyone in Duns Players for organising a brilliant celebration of and for Dad during the last year of his life. An evening with Bob Noble was a wonderful interview which covered Dad's professional purposes and personal passions, one of which was music. And the whole evening was set wonderfully to some of Dad's favourite tunes. It was kind of like David Letterman meets This Is Your Life meets Desert Island Discs. And as fate would have it, that night, as John was in the Volunteer Hall in Duns celebrating the life of my father, many of my friends from Chicago were also in Duns celebrating the life of John's uncle, musician and artist Rory McEwen, who many regard as the 20th century's greatest botanical painter. They were there because of a collection of Rory's incredible art, which is owned by Kew Gardens, is currently on tour of the United States and heading for Chicago, where it will be on exhibit at the Driehaus Museum from May until August 2025. I'm honoured to be part of a group who've put together a series of events to celebrate all aspects of Rory's life. His brilliant musicianship and passion for Scottish and American folk music will be celebrated in concert at Chicago's venerable Old Town School of Folk Music, and his roots in Scotland will be celebrated at our Highland Games in Chicago, where we will honour Clan McEwen, and that will be led, of course, by John. So, Sir John, welcome. Let's start with Marchment. Can you tell me who was Rory McEwen?
Hi, yes, Rory.
Oh, yeah.
He was, there were 7 of them, my father's family. And Rory was the 3rd son, my father was the 2nd son. And from a very early age, I've just been reading my grandfather's wartime diaries from 1940 onwards, because he was the MP, he was the local MP in Berwickshire. And Rory, already at the age of 8, is called the Wizard by his family, because he was so constantly creative and looking into the heart of things, which is why he's actually important to in my life. He played a big part. I was good friends with his son Adam. I'm good friends with Adam, who's my contemporary. So we were all mucking along together as children. But Rory was definitely the first person who ever spoke to me as if I had something interesting to say, age 7 or something. And that really, really struck me. And that seems to be what people say about Rory now, is that he was always very, very attentive to what mattered about people, about everything, about things, about life, about art, about music. So I'm very pleased to have known him.
Let's talk about his musical identity. I wondered if you could talk to us in particular about the wonderful journey that he and his brother Alex took to the United States and where that led him.
I can just hear you, Gus, actually, but I think you're talking about his partnership with Alex.
Yes,
yeah,
indeed, and their journey to the United States.
Into America, yeah. They their elder brother Jamie had a huge collection of jazz records, and there was a splendid music room at Marchmont. So they all listened assiduously to, you know, quite out there American jazz from a very early time, and so they got into it, as well as the Scottish ballad collection. And in the early 50s, off they went to America with their guitars, and they were a hit. They had 2 appearances on the Ed Sullivan Show. I think this was slightly helped by the McCarthy situation, that there was a slight absence of people because everyone else was slightly tinged, maybe, all the other candidates to go on to the McCarthy to the Ed Sullivan Show. But they were on it. You know, 17 million people watched it. They were big stars.
Okay, great. Would you talk to us about the trip that the brothers took across the United States, and they recorded with Alan Lomax, and eventually were directed to meet with Lead Belly's widow, the famous 12-string guitar?
You're talking about when they came across the States?
Yes.
Yeah. And they were real troubadours. They really went for it, and they really wanted to get, like Rory did, he wanted to get to the heart of things. So Lead Belly seems to be is such an important figure in 20th century music, isn't he? Everyone kind of, you go back and back, and it always seems to come back to Lead Belly. And they went to his widow, because he hadn't died for very long, I don't think. And she they were nervously approaching her, and expressed their interest in the 12-string guitar. And so she got his Lead Belly's 12-string guitar out and let them play it. I mean, it was quite a thing. And then Eck stayed behind and had a long session with blind Gary Davis, learning the blues. Right. So it was very groundbreaking and brave thing to do. They seem to be just completely unfazed. They just went for it.
I imagine 2 young lads from Scottish borders showing up at this widow's doorstep must have been an unusual thing, particularly if they sang All Weevil Blues and some of those great Lead Belly songs to his widow. But they must have done it well if she agreed to give them the 12-string guitar from under the bed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rory came back to the UK shortly after that and was asked to host a groundbreaking television show called Hullabaloo, which was music in the round, and was a forerunner for so many of the shows that are hosted now, including, of course, the one hosted by Rory's son-in-law, Jules Holland. But at the height of his musical fame and at the height of Hullabaloo's success, Rory took a brave decision to give up music and pursue his original muse, which was botanical art. Would you talk to us a little about Rory's artistic accomplishments? Yeah,
sure. I'll just say that you can see Hullabaloo. There's a DVD of Hullabaloo, and it is amazing how unaffected Rory is by anything other than the music of the people he's speaking to. I mean, it's early 60s. He doesn't care if you're a black woman or, you know, whatever you're talking about. It's the music, and it's very, very striking how unbothered he is by that. But anyway, I mean, that's just the same thing I'm talking about. He wants to go to the heart of things, and that's what I think he thought, that other people could play music, other people could introduce it like he was doing, but no one could quite paint a flower like he could, which I think is true. He thought that he had a particular gift for getting to the heart of things through flowers, which was quite deep idea, really. You know, he said somewhere that I paint flowers as a way of getting as close as possible to what I perceive as the truth, my truth of the time in which I live. I mean, that's quite a mystical thing to say, really. I mean, he's living through the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. These are quite turbulent times, and he thinks that the truth of is seen through a flower. I mean, it's quite a spiritual quest he's on, really, quite deep and mystical. And I think he just felt that he had to do it.
I've never seen such vivid, almost living art as Rory's paintings of tulips. Yeah. We have some slides which I think we're trying to get on screen now to give some examples. These are some of the things that we've talking about, recording with Alan Lomax, Leadbelly, Hullabaloo. Next one, there's an example of one of his incredible paintings of a tulip, which John, he painted in quite an unusual way, as I'm aware. Could you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, well, he painted on vellum with tiny brushes and very almost dry watercolor. So,
go ahead, John.
Apparently, to watch him doing it was like watching somebody, a watchmaker, fixing a watch. It's just such small, really precise movements that produces these, not count, they're vellums, mostly. Sometimes he's on paper, but mainly the most characteristic ones are vellum, which doesn't, the paint doesn't absorb into it, sort of tints on top of it somehow, and gives it a slight three-dimensional feel about it. There was a big show at Kew Gardens a few years ago, and I mean, I'm used to seeing one or two in a house, amongst other pictures, but to see them all together, it was really quite almost overwhelming. I mean, it's like a surrealism.
Yeah, it's that show that's coming, or that is in the States at the moment. It was in South Carolina. It's currently in Boston. Then I think it goes down to Florida before it comes to Chicago from May to August. And
yeah, that's right.
I'm actually delighted that it does at that particular time, because you're going to be talking to Maggie in just a moment about your journey to the chiefship, and I'm delighted that we will honour the McEwen clan at our Highland Games in June next year, and hopefully we'll gather as many McEwens as we can to go to the exhibition at the Driehaus Museum, also to the concert that we're going to curate at the Old Town School of Folk Music in celebration of the conversation that Rory and Eck had. Scottish folk music meets American folk music. I think it's going to be really fascinating. But the other thing that I hope you'll do when you come to Chicago is I hope we might be able to persuade you to perform Country Scotland, What Like Is It? I'm interested in what audiences who've seen the play, what they hear. Could you tell us a bit about the play, the why, when, and where, and how did you write it? And whether I might be able to persuade you, or rather the show's principal voice, Dr. Stramash, to help us understand Scotland's essential nature and opine on whether there is such a thing as the Scottish psyche.
Well, it came about really because of history, in that as a youngster growing up in the borders, I assumed, because of my upbringing and because of history, that one would go to London, to England to learn. So I went off and did a English literature degree, which in UCL, University College of London. And when I kind of kept wanting, well, actually, I kept banging on about Scotland in London, and somebody said, look, if you're going to be like that, you might as well go and live there, which I thought, well, that's true. So I thought, I've got to go back to Scotland, but I didn't know anything about my own literature. So I did a master's degree at Glasgow in Scottish literature, and discovered this, became aware of this huge wealth of wonderful Scottish literature, which is very distinct from English literature, and neglected because of being, well, for historical reasons. So from then I felt that I wanted to do what I could to publicize it, because a lot of my fellow countrymen don't know about Scottish literature at all. So when it was actually thanks to Bob Noble, I only found out this when he died, that I got back into theatre, as you were saying before, because he'd asked our friend Peter, he'd told our friend Peter that I had been in the theatre and had got distracted and would like to get back into it. And so Peter got me back into Glengarry Glen Ross from David Mamet from Chicago. And that was it. It's been theatre ever since. So that's thanks to Bob. But when doing that, I wanted to get as much out and about as I possibly could, and thought that this was a good way to combine enthusiasms, was to make a one-man play about Scotland and Scottish literature. So the play is basically a sort of deranged animated book of quotations, looking for the essence of Scottishness, perhaps, if there is such a thing, because there might well not be. The Scottish national character might not really exist. It's indefinable, certainly. But I do feel that it's not. I do think that it's quite distinctive and comes as a result of being a slightly unusual place, in that it was never, the Romans never conquered it, the Normans never conquered it, and its national identity coalesced as a kind of form of resistance against the Vikings, against the Romans, against the English. And it's always been multicultural, which is another unusual thing about it. Other un-Romanized countries were single unity ethnic group, but Scotland's always been for at least different groups of peoples. And with the big Celtic influence, there's a big egalitarian feel about Scotland, and a very much an emphasis on the individual, which I feel, I'm sure, informed the work of Duns Scotus from Duns, like you and I, Gus. And I feel certain that that informed the Declaration of Our Growth, which I would say surely is the model for the Declaration of Independence, the American Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson said he based it on nothing, no other document ever. But well, I think it's a bit more of a coincidence that there are so many similarities between the two documents. And so if I were to bring the show to Chicago, I would certainly hope to at least discuss the possibility that Scottishness, and particularly that egalitarian individual feel about it all, that Celtic respect for the person rather than the institution, has informed certainly the American education system, and perhaps other aspects about of Americanness. But anyway, that's where I am.
Looking forward to, certainly looking forward to welcoming you to Chicago for our Highland Games, and there will be a ready-made audience for you. We have a stage set. The mic is yours, and I'd love to hear the play, particularly the 2016 production of it, because I understand that somebody played God in this particular production.
Yes, well, that was a kind of forerunner of this, which was specifically about John Duns Scotus, whose 750th anniversary we were celebrating in Duns. And yes, we had various characters involved in that, and one of them was indeed God, who was played by Bob Noble in a white suit, because God obviously does look like Bob Noble in a white suit, and he was, as always, gave an excellent performance. I think he played Jesus before in Jesus Christ Superstar, but this was a step up. Maybe would you say that? But it was anyway another string to his bow was the playing of God by Bob. It was great.
Well, when you do come to Chicago, we'll have to make sure you visit Caledonia Senior Living. Our principal charity is a nursing home that we have, and I mention this because there is a hub of folks over in Chicago at Caledonia Senior Living who are tuning in and listening to us. And I just wanted to say hello to my friends over in Chicago from Alexandria, Virginia. And speaking of friends, I'd like to invite Maggie McEwen to join our conversation, because as well as your uncle, your trip to Chicago, and your play, we've invited you to talk today with Maggie, who I'm delighted is not just a friend, but a member of our host committee, about your journey to chiefship, and take a look at the process of becoming the first chief of Clan McEwen for 500 plus years. So John, now as I step away from the microphone to make way for Maggie, I thank you, and I'll see you in Duns and Chicago. Thanks, Maggie, it's all yours.
Thank you, Gus. It's great to see you, and Sir John, it's great to see you as well.
Hi, Maggie.
I don't seem to have my video up in front of me, but we'll work it out somehow. Okay. I first joined or became a member of the Clan McEwen Society in 2019. And I went to that AGM that year. That was the first time I had been there. I left as Commissioner of Canada, but that's another story. When I got there, everybody's talking about, oh, we're hoping to have a chief one of these days. And we're sort of voting for something like that. I had no idea what was going on whatsoever. But these people had been working towards the enormously long path to become, for Sir John to become our chief, and I just wondered what was going on. So I have a question for you. I'm a lot more knowledgeable now of what's been happening, but what on earth was the reason that a bunch of McEwens decided that the clan needed a hereditary chief after more than 500 years? And what's the point of a clan anyway? Over to you, John.
Well, we needed a chief because it was clear that clans without chiefs were slightly in the second rank. And this became particularly noticeable in 1994 when the McLachlan clan, I mean, we're all good friends, of course, but the McLachlans were putting out advertisements which suggested that the McEwen clan was a sect of the McLachlan clan. Now, we'd been without a chief since 1449, probably. And a lot of McEwens did a lot of different things. I mean, some of them got into a little bit of hot water, and some of them did make alliances with the McLachlans, but this did not make us a sept of the McLachlans. And because we are a very important clan back then, in the heyday of the clans, but it was worked out that there was nothing we could do about this. We couldn't combat their slightly misleading advertisement because we had no representative at the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs. So the Clan Society at that time got in touch with me because my grandfather, who'd been made a baronet in 1953, was then approached about becoming the chief of the clan, and it kind of went into abeyance, that quest. But in '94, they got in touch with me and said, would I like to be the chief of the clan? And I said, oh yes, that'd be lovely. But I didn't realize that quite what it meant. So it took another 20 years of investigation and negotiation before I became the commander of the clan. And that was it was a sort of apprentice chief, but not really. It was more like keeping the fire going while we kept on looking for a descendant of the last chief. But as Sweyn McEwen died probably in 49, that's pretty unlikely to find a descendant, but we had to look. We kept on searching. But the chiefship actually hasn't been ratified quite yet. We, as a clan, decided that we would have a chief back in June. Remember, Maggie? But we need the Lord Lion to say yes. We need his approval, and we're just on the brink. We're just waiting for that moment. But so that was it, really. We needed to. We felt that we were a big enough and important enough clan to be in the first rank of clans, which meant having a chief. But why are clans important is an ongoing discussion, really. I mean, I could say that my friendship with you, Maggie, is a result of clanship, and therefore that's what the clan. My friendship with you is the reason that clans exist, perhaps one might say, in a kind of minimal sort of way. But really, I suppose you'd have to say that the diaspora, as was being talked about before by Colin, he says 20 million, 25 million Americans claim Scottish descent. People have talked about 80 million throughout the world claiming Scottish descent. I mean, it's a lot of people, and it's a lot more of the people that there are in Scotland. And we feel that the clan system is the one that will bind that into a family, really, into an international family. And that's what we're looking to achieve. I mean, if the last McEwen chief was in 1449, I like to think about what we have in common with those last McEwens. You know, there's quite a lot. You know, we're from the shores of Loch Fyne, and I'm sure they love that land as much as we do, and they love feasting and merriment and music. But now it can't be denied that the clan is an international family, and an awful lot of the engine comes from North America. I think 3/4 of our society membership is from the US. So and that's how it's going to be. It's an international family, but always going to be based in Scotland. Feels a bit like the Catholic Church or something. It's always going to be based in Rome, isn't it? But it's, you know, a lot of the energy comes from Africa at the moment, in that context. And I think that's what. But really, the clans are finding their way. They're not quite sure what they're about, but I think of them as that, as a kind of as a binding agent for the Scotland and its diaspora.
Well, thank you. I was going to ask you about the path leading up to this stage. We had a wonderful get together. I don't remember what it's called, where last summer in Otter Ferry with the Adam Bruce from the Lord Lions group. And he gave us a wonderful speech to start off with. We were all in an enormous tent. And I think it was probably raining outside because it was a very unfortunate 3 days this year. But it was fun. But he gave us this fabulous speech about how important this whole meeting was. And I'm beginning to get tearing up with emotion, but how important it was for everybody associated with Clan McEwen, whether they knew about it or not, that this was an enormous historical pathway to having our wonderful chief inaugurated. Can you tell us any more about the path that you had to go through? I know you had to have
Yeah, well,
stuff.
we're slightly unusual. There have been other chiefs sort of refound recently, but mostly they've come from they've been the descendant of the previous chief, like Carruthers, Buchanan, Morrison, McNabb, Mackenzie. They've all gone through a similar process to us, but I think we're the only ones that have done it quite like this, because there was no way that we could find a descendant. I mean, we looked, we did try, but it was very unlikely that we were going to find a descendant of Sweyn McEwen. So we had to just choose somebody. And then, so that was quite a process to get to the commandership in 2014. That took quite a long time. But having got there, we had to prove that we were united. That was a very important thing, because there's always factions. The clan sphere does bring out some eccentricities amongst the people, and there can be factions developing. I mean, we've got a very active chairman, you know, Sean McEwen, and he's very keen that we should have one organization, which is very helpful, rather than several different clan societies throughout the world. I think we should have one. I think that would be recommended to any clan, is to have one society based in Scotland, and the other countries kind of be part of that. So we had to prove that we were united, and we had to prove that we were organized. And nowadays, that's quite a feat. With people like you, Maggie, in Canada, and Chris in Australia, and Bob and Carol in America, in the US, we've got some tremendous ambassadors out there, and we've got Sean, as I said, and Ross McEwen is becoming a world authority on heraldry. So we are very lucky in our team in that way, but we've got to do have had to do quite a lot of proving that we were on it, you know, and at it, and we were organized, and we knew about the legals, and we knew about the social media, and we knew about everything that was required, because we've had to be out in the open with our quest, and I feel that the Lord Lion and the Lion Court is observing the McEwen way, because we're kind of setting the path for other clans, because more and more clans are becoming interested in finding themselves a chief, even if they've never had a chief before. We've certainly had a chief before, but we can't. No one's claiming any descent from him. Although you and I might well be descended from her, Maggie, but we can't be certain.
Definitely. Well, I think we've used up our time, John.
Well, thanks very much, Maggie. It was lovely to see you again.
It's lovely to see you. Look forward to seeing you in Chicago.
Oh, I hope we can get that worked out.
For sure. I mean, it's not that far away from Toronto, so and
Okay,
I have relatives there.
right,
I
okay,
should be there with relatives.
right, great.
Okay, thank you.
That's what we do.